Good morning. Welcome to Autumn Equinox. We're going to be working with making a motanka. It's a particular kind of motanka. A lot of people who have seen motanki displayed either in paintings or murals, or have actually seen a physical motanka, probably don't realize that motanki have many different forms that they take. A motanka is a talisman. It's a ritually, ceremoniously made talisman that takes the form what looks like a doll. Actually, it's not a doll, though. It's a vessel. It's a vessel for the ancestral wisdom and in welcoming in the ancestors. It's a vessel for intention and prayer. It's a vessel for helping to maintain the well-being, the health, the wealth of whoever is the caretaker of that particular motanka. I'm going to turn the camera a little bit just so you can see what we've got going on here as our setup. I apologize for the fractal patterns. I actually have a little tiny crack that goes right in front of my camera. So hopefully you're going to be able to see a lot of the things. I have some incense burning in my lovely cauldron. This cauldron I use for doing prayer fires when I'm in backyards and things like that, or even out if I'm in the forest in the winter. I'm currently burning some of the incense that I make. You'll see some lovely smoke wafting across me sometimes, so you just know that that's there. The incense, by the way, is fully natural, locally grown, ethically foraged, and I love making it. It's a real treat. I have water that I had on my altar space inside overnight. It has prayers in it and a flower. I have a small head of grain. This is for the ancestors. And you probably can't see it from your angle, but there's also a beeswax candle that's burning. I have offerings. These offerings I'll just explain as we go through the process of making the motanka. I'm going to turn the camera again, just so that we can see each other. So some of the things that I have for supplies, it's a really simple motanka to make. Get yourself some scrap fabric. I have bins and bins and bins of scrap fabric. Some of it is purchased at thrift stores. Some of it is donated. This was a beautiful donated gift from a friend. Some of it is my old clothing that you have here. I keep all of those scraps of fabric. I will not go into the long litany of what happens with fabric into landfills, especially landfills that are not necessarily in the country that you might be living in, but are sent away to other locations and become piles, mountains, literally the size of mountains. So as much as you can do to reuse your fabric, I really encourage it. String, it doesn't have to be colorful, just some sort of string. It's better than using thread. Thread can be used, but thread takes a little bit longer for the process. Scissors, ding. And then for this particular motanka that we're making, which is called a Krupianytsa or Krupiansky, this is a nickel. You want to find some denomination of 5 to put into her body. That can be a coin. It can be also a bill. You can work with like a $5 bill. I have grains. I'll say more about the history of working with the grains for this particular kind of motanka. And then I have a splattering of other things that have personal meaning to me, which I'll describe as we get to that part. So, step 1. Step 1 is that we're going to make the head and then the body of this particular motanka. Now this motanka, so I said that a motanka is a talisman in the form of a doll. Well, actually the talisman is a representation of different forms of Mother Earth. So this particular form of Mother Earth is a protector and an amplifier. Because it is made at after the grain harvest has been brought in and you have your grain heads, your seeds. Her purpose is to protect those grains over the winter. She's called a temporary talisman, a temporary Motanka, which means that you're not going to keep this Motanka forever. In fact, there are many Motanki that Motanki is the plural, Motanka is the singular. There are many Motanki that are temporary talismans. They're not intended to keep, they're intended to do a job. That's what they're there for. And when the job is complete, they are ceremoniously released. What does that mean? Usually they're burned or buried, or they're given over to wild running water. I often recommend, if you're going to put them into running water, that you don't put them in the ocean, because they'll go out and come back in, and that's not the purpose. We want them to release, move away. If you're going to bury them, they need to be buried someplace where others will not walk on them. So I often will bury them underneath a bush, or bury them underneath the root of a tree, or something like that. Somewhere where I'm fairly certain that somebody else is not going to walk on them for the time that they're in the ground until they disintegrate. And if you burn them, make sure you burn them carefully, and probably not during the burning season, the fire ban season. So this one would usually be disassembled in the spring, because what we want to do is take the seeds that we are protecting and use them for next year's crops. So when it comes time to plant your crops, you've got your seeds that have been well taken care of by this particular Motanka. But as a talisman, it can protect anything. So it can be used to help with the abundance, not just abundance in terms of food, but also abundance in whatever your needs happen to be. And I'll say more about why we have a nickel Y5 denomination later. It can also be a holder, keeper, and amplifier of your prayers and your intentions. If you have something that you're working on over the length of a season or two, then this particular Motanka is very useful for that. Krupianytsa. I have to apologize. I am not a native Ukrainian speaker. I only know a few words here and there, splatterings of words, and my pronunciation will be absolutely horrendous. I will do my best. So the next thing that we want to do is to decide, well, what do we want the body of the Motanka to be in terms of the basic skin color and or the what they're going to be adorned with or wear. And I've decided I'm going to use this lovely silk shirt that I've been using for special projects as the upper body. And so what we want to do is cut a square. Now, back in other times, as one of my lovely mentors, Della Rice Sylvester, would say, in the long ago days, which might be 70 years ago or 700 years ago, depending on what her point of reference was. In the long ago days, what we would be doing is actually tearing the fabric, because we would have fabric that would have served both as clothes and then later as like tea towels and cloths, and then again later maybe to some other purpose. And finally, when they have no other sort of capacity to serve those household uses, then they will become something that you can use for working with one of the motanki. I can't tear this, and I don't have fabric that is that old. Well, actually I do have a few things, but I didn't bring it out today. So I'm going to use scissors. Now, traditionally we wouldn't want to cut the motanka, because there's a few rules in making motanka. One is that we don't want to pierce the body with any kind of implement. So we wouldn't use a needle to pierce the body of the motanka. When I'm teaching children's classes, I ask them, well, why do you think that is? So I'm asking you guys, why do you think that is? The reason that we don't pierce the body, especially once it's made, and even as we're making it, is that we don't want basically it to leak out any of the intentions that we've put into it, nor do we want to invite in any negative spirits, any negative energy, any sort of things that somebody else might be throwing your way. It is intended as a vessel for the ancestors and ancestral wisdom, and as a keeper and amplifier of all of the good things that you want to amplify. So that's why we don't pierce it. My breaking of that rule is when I cut. So I will cut the fabric, keep the raw edges, and then from that point forward, I will not pierce it. I will not sew the doll. The entire thing, the entire assembly of a motanka is done by binding, and I'll say more about binding soon. So let's start with making a square. It doesn't actually have to be a perfect square. You don't have to have perfect edges for any part of this practice. So you will see that I have made a square. What is the size of the square? I'll put it against my chest. You can see it's about 1 hand length and a bit. Again, it doesn't have to be a particular size. What it needs to be is a size that you can work with, and everything is done in relative terms. So if you have a particular size that you're making a motanka, it can be as small as this or smaller. I have a mentor. She makes teeny tiny little motanki. And also it can be a huge motanka. It can be like life size or bigger. So everything is relative in its proportions. I have made this square because it's easiest for me to work with. And now I'm going to take some of the scrap fabric that I have here, and I'm going to make the stuffing for the head. I'm just folding it up a little bit. You can scrunch it up, you can fold it up, depends on the shape of the head that you want to create. I'm going to make one that looks kind of like a marshmallow. Maybe a little bit more. Okay, here we go. All right, so the inner stuffing is now in the shape of a marshmallow. And I'm going to put that marshmallow in the very center. Of the fabric. And then I will fold the fabric down over the marshmallow. This I have decided is going to be her face. The back is just folded. You'll see that I'm using my non-dominant hand to hold the fabric in place while I get some of my string. And let's see if I can find the end of the string. Not really. Okay, well, we'll just make use of it. So with my non-dominant hand, I'm holding around the neck. The stuffing is in the top of the head. Don't worry if it's a little bit misshapen, because she will eventually have a kerchief or hat. In my non-dominant hand, I'm placing a tail of the string, like a mouse's tail, hanging down. And now I will wrap around the neck. I want to wrap firmly. So as I go around, I don't want to be loose where the stuffing is going to fall out of the head. You don't want to be overly tight and break the string. Ideally, we're wrapping without breaking the string. If by chance you break a string while you're wrapping, you might notice what you were thinking at the time. Sometimes our thoughts wander away from our practice. This is a ritual practice. We want to try and stay as focused as we can. So you might notice what you're thinking at that moment when it broke. You might also notice the part of the body that you were wrapping where the string broke. Those can sometimes be indications, again, where you've had a thought that's interfering, or there's a part of your body that might be experiencing an energy break. If you're making a motanka for somebody else, that might be something to pay attention to for their own well-being. I am tying 3 knots. Anytime we make a motanka and we're binding an area, we will tie it 3 times. There are certain numbers that are considered, I don't know what you want to say, lucky numbers maybe, important numbers, representative numbers. So 3 is the number of times that we tie the knot. Each time I tied the knot, in my own mind and heart, even though I was talking out loud to you guys, I'm saying to myself, I bind my prayers to this motanka. I bind my prayers, these intentions, to this motanka. So the head is now complete, and I'm going to put it aside. Because this is a temporary motanka, we are not going to do the facial wrap, which you would see as being sort of associated with motanki. In fact, there's, I don't know if the word controversy is kind of strong as a word, but there is mixed thoughts on the wrapping of the motanka. Was it done traditionally? Was it not done traditionally? When was it done? For what purpose did it serve? The facial wraps and the entire sort of body shape of a motanka are associated in the pre-Christian practices with what's called a solar cross. Solar cross is where it's kind of like the same idea as the world tree or the tree of life. There's energy that comes in from the cosmic forces. There's energy that reaches deep into the underworld or the other world that is drawn up, and they all meet in the earth plane or at level of the heart, which is really important. And so because it's a temporary motanka, we won't do the facial wrappings. If you think about it in terms of conservancy of resources, people would have to make their string in pre-Christian times, and you don't go to a store and buy it. Or maybe you would, but you would be trading for it. It takes resources, it takes time. And so why waste something that you're going to be burning later? Some of the motanki that you would keep long term, then you may be putting the facial wrapping on, if indeed it was done, depending on, again, the purpose for the particular motanka. I'm not going to go into more detail about that. Let's go on to the next part, which is I'm now going to make the base of this particular motanka, which is not the commonly seen one, which is like a simple straight body. This one has a base where we actually contain things, and then becomes part of the straight part of the body where we attach the arms and the head. I'm going to use this lovely fabric that my friend gave me for the base. And so we want a big enough square that not only will it be able to house the things that you're going to put into it, but it will also form the trunk of the body. So it's going to be somewhat larger than the square that I made for the head. And for now, I'm going to put this fabric down So I'll show you this, how big it is. This is bigger than the last one. You can see here's against my chest. It goes shoulder to shoulder. Again, it doesn't have to be precise, especially when I'm working in children's classrooms. Our squares and rectangles that we end up making are quite creative and not necessarily a straight line. I'm going to put this nickel in. That's the first thing I'm putting down. You don't have to put it as the first thing down. It's what I'm putting down as the first thing. So why nickel? Well, 5 represents the elementals: earth, water, fire, wind or air, and spirit. 5 elementals. And being able to work with the elements, being able to honor their place in our lives is really important. The energy of the fire, the energy of the wind, the essential life-giving qualities of water and of the earth. And then all of them brought together in cohesion with the energy of spirit. That's what the 5 represents. On a more mundane level, this is a representation of my current ability to trade, pay my bills, rent, buy food, things like that in this particular capitalist society. I could trade with goods, and that's also what these kinds of things can represent. Putting in herbs, putting in seeds. I don't need to grow my own grains, although I would love to be able to. I don't have the skill, nor do I have the land base, nor do I have the time, to be frank, to do the amount of labor it takes to create this. However, I will put this in because I'm honoring my ancestors, and because I still recognize this as a representation of life-giving qualities. So that's why I personally am putting these in. In years past, I have put in flaxseed that I have purchased. I'm not going to get rid of this. I'm actually going to put it into my cauldron. I can burn it at another time. And I'm not going to take these seeds off. I'm just going to bend them over so that they actually fit. Okay. All of that is now currently in the center. There we go. Other things that I'm choosing to include. So one of the things that I make is the hand-formed incense. I actually form all of this by hand. I'm going to crush it up and put it in the center. It's part of how I actually support myself. This is one of a piece of fabric that I had dyed, and it's made out of silk as well. And so when I am crafting using these, whether it's for the motanki, for exhibits, or for exchange with other people, or one of the shawls that I make using this, or any of the other kinds of things that I hand sew, I just want these to be here with me over the winter while I am working on sustenance. This little tin of herbs I carry with me, usually when I'm out in the forest and I want to give an offering, if I'm feeling called to make a prayer or just honor something that I have found, or if I am exchanging for harvesting a plant, I leave an offering. This is a mix of 10 different herbs. A lot of them were herbs that the grandmothers in Ukraine would have used. Some of them are true to these lands here, and I've mixed them. These are hand rubbed, and I really have a close connection to those plants. This particular dried flower is from the plant called datura. I will not go into the very long story about my relationship with Datura. I will simply say that it was brought to me or given to me in a dream from another plant who I consider to be my main teacher. I call her Ma, or honeysuckle. After a few months of apprenticing with her, I was given an extremely powerful dream in which I was introduced to Datura. I call her Dark Ma. They're like, the sun and the moon to me. And so, and actually another word for Datura is moonflower. So I include these to honor the teachers. And to honor one of my mentors, Della, who I mentioned before, Della Ray Sylvester. Della is a medicine woman in the Cowichan Valley on Vancouver Island. I'm not there right now. I'm in Ontario, northwestern Ontario. These seeds are lomatium. She had given them some time ago. We tried to plant a few of these. Some of them did grow. A lot of them, when I'm again out in forests, I would spread them out. They're not indigenous to here. I am including them in honor of her and all of her love and teachings. If you want to know more about her, she has a website called Intertribal Trades. You can look her up. She makes wonderful medicine. I'm including a little piece of beeswax. So I also make pisanki, which we'll do together on video come spring. Working with beeswax, there's something that feels very, I don't know what word best to use, grounding, primal. It's amazing, actually, as an artistic medium. And so we write designs onto eggshells using the beeswax. It forms an area of resist so that when you drop the egg into dye, the dye goes everywhere where the beeswax is not. And you can actually make multiple layers of colors onto your pisanki by putting more and more layers of beeswax, which you eventually melt off. So working with the beeswax feels very important to me, and I really honor the representation that it holds for me. The bees are pollinators. They help to sustain us in this world. All of the pollinators do. And honoring the pollinators and their place in our lives is really important. So I'm including it here. Bees and beeswax are considered to be energies related to the sun, and the sun as one of the elements, the element of fire, again, is life imparting. It brings life onto the deep, dark, rich earth so that life can grow. And the last thing that I'm going to include is some ceremonial tobacco that was grown on Vancouver Island, and put that in as well with a blessing and a thank you for this beautiful substance that is honored in many different cultures and can be considered also a trade substance. So the elders who are here in Ontario, what's so-called Ontario, I'm on Treaty 3 territory, I would bring them a tobacco offering when first greeting them and respectfully making a connection, a relationship connection. So this is not enough stuff for her body. I'm going to also include some extra stuffing. And of the fabrics that I have here, I think I will simply use this. That's a little bit much. I have a bee friend who you might hear buzzing coming around. Since we talked about the beeswax, they have decided to listen. Okay, that should be enough. So this little pile here now is the stuffing of the body. And what I'm going to do is fold my bee friend. It's actually not uncommon that those things happen. So oftentimes when I'm working with clients and, you know, especially if one or both of us are outside, crows or unusual birds will come by during our phone sessions. And that's a whole other story as well about my connection to the crows. So we spoke about bees, and then a bee shows up. All right, what have I done? I have created a little pouch by folding up all of the corners and edges. And what I want to do is actually look at, if that's the body, does it make sense for this size of head? I think I'm going to add a little bit more stuffing. Just a little. Just to make it a little bit more substantial. Well, let's see. So if your Motanka, your Krupianytsa, has done a good job over the winter, rather than burning, burying, or releasing her to the wild, moving waters, you can also disassemble her, which, if you're doing it truly ceremoniously, ritualistically, you would have to untie your knots, unbind her body, take the fabrics, wash them, and dry them in the sun on the ground, and then reuse the fabric. You can reuse it for another Krupianytsa, or you can reuse it in some other form. So I mention that because that's another consideration if you feel like she's done a good job. And if she hasn't done a good enough job, that's where you can burn or bury. Or if it's time for you to simply release, like if let's say that she's a holder for certain intentions for you that have no longer relevance for you, or you feel like you need to let go of some of the energy that she accumulated over the winter, then you can also release her in the other forms that I mentioned. So what have I done? I've now wrapped around, there's my tail, here's my main string is still attached. I've wrapped it around, and what I'm going to do is now wrap all the way up to the top and then back down. And we're doing this sort of in a, like, making a candy cane that goes both ways. You'll see it's a diagonal wrap. I'm also keeping it quite tight. And when I get to the top, I want to again assess how much of this trunk do I need for this size of head. I'm going to fold it over slightly because I don't need it to be that big. And I will wrap that. Oops. If any of you have ever worked with poultices in bodywork, it also looks like a poultice. When I get to the bottom, I'm actually not going to tie it yet, because what I'm going to do now is attach the head to the body. I'm taking the head and I'm turning it upside down and opening up the fabric, the loose fabric, as if it's kind of a flower revealing its center. And I'm taking the trunk and I'm inserting it into the flower, center of the flower, where I can now fold the petals over top and turn it back upside down. Reposition. Yeah. Reposition to a kind of a shape that you like. Fold the petals down. And now wrap that loose neck material into the trunk. Hopefully you can see enough of what I'm doing. Again, this is a temporary and very simple motanka. It's not like the fancy ones. I don't mind that you're going to see the wrapping. Oftentimes with the fancy ones, you really don't see much of the wrapping by the time you get the motanka dressed. Okay, so this is kind of what she looks like right now. At this point, I'm choosing to tie my two tails together. I bind these prayers and intentions to this motanka. I've done that 3 times, and I will snip off the long tails. I keep the strings. I will either use them as stuffing in another part of the motanka, or I will use it in stuffing in another motanka, so either in this one or that I'm making or in some other future one, or I will burn them. So these ones I'm going to keep and use for the next parts. The next part that I'm going to make is the arms and the breasts. And as a representation of the Mother Earth and its bounty and capacity to hold that abundance, I'm making her with big breasts. I'm going to do that by, I could give her blue, I could give her pink. I think I'll go with the pink again. Oops. She's not wanting to stand up right now. I'll fix that later. Just let her rest. So the breasts are like 2 little body sacks. You've already made 1 sack for the body and 1 for the head. Now you're going to make 2 little ones. You may also put things into the breasts or not. It's up to you. I will probably put a little bit of herbs back into it. They don't need to be square or rectangle. They can be one or the other. It's up to you. Just for the sake of having cut it, I made a square, or sorry, a rectangle. Here's the second rectangle. And now stuffing. I'll put in a little bit of fabric. And I will give a little bit of herb, some of the prayer herbs. Seems a lot of them want to come out, that's fine. There we go. Fold the fabric in a way where, again, you can make a little sack. There's no right or wrong way to do this. That's breast number 1. If you wonder what I say in my head, I'll put it on loudspeaker for now. Bless, bless, bless. There's geese in the background. I don't know if you can hear them. There's a lovely chirping red squirrel. There's two red squirrels who chase each other quite a bit through this area. There we go. I will also cut off these strings. I'm going to put these strings and the last strings into this next breast, just because. Fold, fold. Squish it. Hopefully it's the same size. It is. Good. And a blessing wrap. When you see me pause at the bottom, actually what I'm doing is I'm pulling the string. When I pull the string, it makes it tighter. Again, it's important not to pull so strongly that you break it. By the way, if you break a string, you have two choices. You can unwrap everything and start over again, not like from the very beginning, but whatever particular binding you were working on at that moment. Like if I had broken it here, I would unwrap and then re-wrap using a non-broken string. I can repair it if I use strong intention. I can say, as I'm repairing the string, like tying the two string ends together, that I repair my broken attention or the area of this body that needs to be healed. So eventually we're going to put these here on her, but we're going to make the arms first. So for the arms, I'm going to go back to the flowered fabric as part of her attire, because in this particular kind of Motanka, I don't mind my binding showing, so my outside of the arm is the color of her dress or shirt, whatever you want to call it. We're not giving her hands. That's important as well to mention, because again, this is about being a temporary Motanka. She doesn't need to have all the fancy bits and pieces. The other thing that I'm going to check in with is the size of the arms. So generally speaking, the size of the arms are no longer than from the base to the neck. For her, and usually I find like 3/4 of that length is long enough for the arms. So we will wrap the arms in this width. It's probably pretty good. You can fold edges to make it a little bit more neat and tight. I'm not going to fold hers. I don't mind, again, that the fabric is raw edge. I will make use of that by creating her hands. Oops, let's try that again. There we go. So you see that as I wrap around the wrist, this automatically becomes her hand. I have to make sure that my tail gets left out so I can tie, and I'm wrapping my way all the way up. Wrapping the other wrist, and then wrapping all the way down. Here I am at the end. Keep my space kind of neat and tidy here. Don't let her fall over. Binding my prayers. Binding my prayers. And binding my prayers. Okay. String put to one side for later. I like to slightly bend my arms so that when I attach them, her hands are reaching a little bit forward. She's cute. I like her. Flattening out the bottom so that she'll have a stronger base. Good. Okay. Once you have the arms located in what feels like the right position for what you would like her to look like, then I'm holding again with my non-dominant hand. I'm going to wrap. I think actually this time I want to use orange. I should show you better what I'm doing. Here's my lovely tail. I start on a diagonal across the chest. So all motanki, when you make them, all of them, doesn't matter which ones, will have an X on the chest. What does that represent? That is a very old symbol of Mother Earth. Look at that. I didn't break it, but it is unattached. So what I'm going to do, may this strengthen her heart. I've done the diagonal in one direction. Now I go along the waist just underneath the arms. Make sure the arms are in the right position for where I want them. And now I will go over the opposite shoulder and make the other part of the X. So the X is a very old symbol of Mother Earth. So in terms of directions of the world tree, most people think in terms of 4 directions: north, south, east, west, and the teachings that come with those. There are other directions to consider. At north, south, east, west is the solar cross that I talked about, which is also found on the Motanka's face and in the shape of their body. That solar cross is like the world tree when you see it from the top to the bottom and then the outstretched branches. However, the X shows stability. Solar cross is sort of like a channeling of energy. This is stability. This is the non-cardinal directions: northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. These are the teachings that are represented by, I would call them like the moon or the feminine forms, maybe, which is kind of looking at some of the ways in which we honor the way that the solar cross and the Mother Earth symbol, which is the moon teachings, cyclical teachings, come together. So if you were to look at the world tree from a bird's eye view, you would see 8 directions, not just 4 directions. You would see the solar cross and the X superimposed over one another. Those 8 directions is complete teachings, the full teachings, and they represent the movement of time. Like if you were spinning a wheel, they represent the movement of time, cycles of time. So the X on the Motanka's chest, there it is. To create more stability in the arms, I take the string and I now wrap it around the shoulder blades only. I'm going between the body and the arms, around the shoulder blades. That makes the arms really stable. I'm not going to tie this off yet because now I need to put on her breasts. There's one breast. There's the other breast. Okay. I'm holding them in place. I will add them by binding them on. I'm going to continue to work with the motif of the X by going between the breasts. To let those breasts come together a little bit, I'm going to circle around the two breasts. I will circle around the arms again. And then from there, I'm going to take all of that lovely extra fabric from the breasts and bind it onto the trunk. Okay. And now I will tie it off. If I can find my other tail, there it is. Blessed be. Blessed be. Oops. There we go. So I want to reinforce that. That just broke. And why did that happen? Because my mind temporarily wandered to the sounds I was hearing in the house. I know exactly what took my attention. Blessed be. Blessed be. And blessed be. And because I'm going to fix it. There we go. Come back into full presence. Do not be wandering. And so I'm doing more binding than I probably need to, but I'm doing that for the reason that I broke the string on the very last step of her body because my attention wandered. And blessed be. Great. Complete. That is her body. You may leave her just like that. You don't have to do any more steps. Or how I want to complete her is to actually give her some adornment, some clothing. So this is her dress. I'm not going to cover those up. I'm going to give her a vest, a little bit of modesty. I say that, I'm being humorous. I don't actually mean it. I just want to give her a vest because I think vests are pretty. And no, this fabric does not match whatsoever, and I don't care. I'm putting it on because I like it. It makes me happy when I see it. I like polka dots. You see the polka dots? And so she shall have polka dots and flowers. So a vest is really simple. It's 2 strips of cloth, diagonal across her. There's one. You want the ample bust to have some visibility. So she will have a lovely cleavage. There she is. I will tie it with a sash. Oh, she's so cute. What will I make the sash out of? I think I'll make the sash to match what I'm going to give her as a head cover. So in Slavic culture, at least the old traditions, once a woman became of a certain age, which is usually marrying when she got married, she would wear a head cover. Different head covers represent the regions that you find yourself in. And the idea behind covering your hair is to protect your well-being so that nobody can, if you have a stray hair that falls out and somebody grabs it, the idea was that somebody could curse you. So rather than letting yourself be cursed, you cover your hair. It's not the only reason, but it is one of the sort of main reasons. The sash is worn not at the waist, like where you would find your pants sitting, but actually just underneath the breasts, at the lowest part of your rib cage, just before your belly begins. And why is that? You would not want to constrict or restrict your energy flow through your abdomen and belly. That's partly for digestion, that's partly for good health, that's partly for maintaining your power, and it's also for ease of monthly bleeds and fertility and pregnancy. So her sash is up high. There she is. There is her lovely vest, part of her dress. Now I will give her a head cover. Most Motanki do not have hair. So if you see one that has hair, either it's very specific to a time of year and a kind of Motanka called a dolia, or sometimes the mermaid ones, but I have never made a mermaid one and I don't know enough about its traditions to speak to it. Dolia is a doll that's called a wishing doll, or a doll who helps to, depending again on the time of year, she works with the fates. Oh, you look lovely, my darling. In the region of my grandmother's on my paternal side, and also actually no, that's not true. Also my paternal grandmothers, my father's mother, and my father's father's mother. I didn't say that right. But anyway, they wore black kerchiefs for their region. They were in the region of Ukraine, which is now called Ternopil. My grandfather came from a village called, and I'm not saying this properly, but Bilchzhelot, where there's these massive cave systems that harbored people through many different years. People who are needing safe harbor. Oh, gosh, I can't even remember the exact years that it goes back to, but I think 5,000 years ago, they've found many different tools and skeletons and remains. They think that those caves were used perhaps during a time when there were either invasions into the lands, or there may have been some sort of climate cataclysm. It also was used in World War II, where people who were Jewish had hid for a length of time. Those caves are very, very important in the history of that region. Anyway, that was where my grandfather came from. My grandmother was in a village a little bit further toward the Polish border. Both my grandmother and my grandfather came over in 1910. That's another story for another time. All right. I'm complete. I like her. I'm very happy with her. This is our completed Krupianytsa. Thank you for sitting with me through this whole process. I hope you've enjoyed some of the stories. I will see you again at our next seasonal node. Take good care. Blessings.